so you know, I'm trying to get these posted on the FEMS portal. We'll see if that works to get these recorded on, or the recordings on there, but I'm hoping that will be the answer to where everything will be going forward. So we'll see how that moves forward with. First off, wanted to do a quick demo of, again, very simple information here. So under the FEMS, under the reports tab, you will see there's a couple of different tabs: the fire danger, weather, station information, and field sample. So we have a couple of different reports in here now. Fire danger summary tab is in here. And so you will be able to click on today's information, and you can sort by, I'm going to expand this out so everybody can see it a little bit better. Sort by your state. So if I click off, and we'll just do, we can do Texas and see where they're looking at today. It will give you the average fire danger outputs, looking at the daily values for the information, and then it will average them. You can also click on and select individual stations, and it will provide for you the daily value. So if you want to grab your SIG information this way as well, you'd be able to look at these charts this way. So that is the modeled fuel moistures going through this way. So again, these reports, we're starting to get the expansion of these out. Let's see here. You also have on the bottom, if you want to look at your different values, again, you can look out 7 days. If we choose our state, let's see here, we'll do Arizona on this one, and you can choose your different stations, and it will give you your ERCs and BIs and all your fire danger outputs as well. So these are pulling off of the daily max values. Again, if you want to be able to start looking at and getting a different view of fire danger outputs by logging in, or by at least by going through FEMS itself, you can do that this way. And it will provide you with, again, the 7-day forecast and prior days of information as well. So right now, currently, we don't have a way to save these reports as of yet. So, but we are working to try and get these so that we have templates that we can share out with groups or share out with individuals so that they can utilize Power BI and customize the reports for themselves. It will be the standard report, but it would be customized to what they want. That way it's always opening the same thing. We also have weather daily summary report that we've been working on. Again, it would just give you your values for the day. So if you want to start looking at where you may be missing data, this is also a really good way to see that. If you're missing, you know, any inputs, what stations might not be showing. So again, really good way to kind of summarize your data and look at where you may or may not have missing information going forward on the weather table itself. And then we do have the station information report. Again, this is really primarily all the metadata for the stations. I showed this last week, and we're working on getting a station health report built up here. Hopefully in the next week or two, we should have that completed, and that will show you really how much flag data or how much quality control issues you'd been having with the station for the historical period of record. So some of the reports are starting to get built up as we get some more time into these areas. So questions on the BI reports?
Hey Scott, it's Kristen. Are you thinking about maybe doing that by GAC as well? So
so those are like
your GAC.
Yeah, so that's the kind of stuff, like as you see stuff. So what the other one I was actually trying to get into would be both fire danger and having these summaries so that we had it not just daily summary, but I want to be able to have it so you could filter by hour. If we need it by GAC, that would be a really, you know, and I believe we should be able to do that, so we can do it by GAC. However we want to do those types of filters, we can do all that. So we just need to know, like, if you have recommendations please send them to me, because we can easily get those built into the filters. And if it's like, hey, just keep this report is good, we just want to have one more filter in there, or if you see that you want to have a whole new report, would also be like, yeah, I want this report, but I want it hourly, or I want this report and I want it, display this way with a simple chart attached to it as well. So I don't know if we can do
Scott,
FDRA.
Yeah, I was just going to speak to that. So some things like a PSA, I see FDRA, by GAC, those are all data dependent. So if we've got the data, we can do it. And if we don't, we're going to have to get that data available to us before we can do it. So some of them will be easy. Some of them will be a little bit more complicated.
Yep. I think GAC we might be able to do. I'm not sure if we have that in the metadata. I think we might, Travis, that we could do the FDRAs and the PSAs. I don't think
If
we
you
have
have
that.
the GAC, you'll be able to pull the PSA, because the AGOL, you could at least pull it from the metadata from AGOL, because they're all connected. So if you go into the, because I just used it for something else, and I know it's in there, so it'll give you the 4-letter designator for the PSA.
Yeah, but yeah, I know it's available, but we're not hooked into that yet. How's that?
Yep, exactly.
So we have to use what metadata we have currently right now for these.
You have this you do have this geographically though. So you could combine them with the shapefile. Okay.
Yeah, some of this, once we get to the point of being able to provide templates, that's a little easier to do, because you can put together the list of stations just by the state and county or whatever designation geographically that we'd need to do there. And then we wouldn't have to rebuild them every time you come in. So those are all definite steps that we can take as we continue to progress through this.
Yeah, a lot of these, this is, again, we were at the crawl, and I think we're barely at we were at the rollover stage with the original release of this, and now we're starting to crawl with the Power BI reports. We're getting to what you guys are looking at and trying to display. That's going to be more of the walk as we get to the full on, what we can do and the capabilities moving forward. So piece by piece is where we're trying to go to. I'm not saying we can't do any of this stuff, but we got to figure out how to make all these connections and get everything to work, and then really make it the most effective. Because instead of us building all of these individually for everybody, I think, as Travis has kind of alluded to, the templates are really where we're trying to go at with this, because then you can build your own, have it, and it's a standard template, and all you have to do is do the filtering yourself, and you always have that set up, and then you don't even have to worry about FEMS that'll load it into our data, but you don't have to worry about building the report. You just do the filtering yourself. So that, I think, is where the utility of this is going to come in, and that where we can start showing more of the possibility of analytical information as well. Other questions on the reports page and what's out there? Like I said, just kind of keep checking that periodically, because we're adding more and more reports as we get forward. Or as we go forward. Okay, the data download. There's been some questions about removing the restrictions that we have. So again, when you do your daily, we have the only 1 year up to 10, for one year greater, only one station, and then the 10 stations for 2 weeks or longer. We are working on getting this expanded out, and there's multiple processes we have to do. The first one is we're trying to set up a queuing system, so that if you are basically, we have a problem where we can do up to like 5-7 stations at a time if we have one user concurrently operating. Since we can't control that just yet, we have to build a queuing system for the users. So if we are, say, in a training at 491 and everybody wants to grab data, we need to make sure that we don't break the API with that. So they're developing the queuing system so that as you start your download process, then and then the next person does it while that download is happening, they get queued up. It gives them a message basically saying, yep, you're number 2 in the queue and your download will start shortly. That way we don't break the system. Once they get that, we'll be able to expand out and be able to have, again, up to, I think right now we're shooting for 7 stations at one time for the entire period of record that we have. And so that'll help out with really that need and that request that everybody's having for getting more data at one time. We're hoping to have that in the next couple of months. I think that's looking at possibly the 3.5 release in mid-December, more likely going to be a 3.6 release. I believe that's probably going to come out in like February or March timeframe. So, but we are hoping, or we are pushing to try and get that completed earlier. So those are some of the, I guess, changes that we have coming up with the download piece. I know the other question was getting station ID back in the charts. And I know that that has been one that we put off during this transition time. And I guess I'm going to ask, are you guys ready to have that? Because that's going to require you to adjust your queries. Or are you guys surviving without the station IDs and the downloads as of right now? You're good without it. Everybody wanted it before.
Yeah, I'm the opposite. Let's rip the Band-Aid off.
That's kind of what I thought, but that was all right. So I will yeah, I guess we'll have to make a decision on that one and see. I know Kevin Osborne used to be a good for vocalizing that one, so but he's no longer doing all the work. But all right, we'll see where we want to go with that one. But that one is also out there to try and get the FEMS ID or the station, I shouldn't say FEMS ID, the station ID back in the downloads and back in the CSV file format. So let's see here. Other than that, long-term planning. So where we are trying to move forward with in FEMS. So beyond the 3.5 release, we are looking to try and integrate more of the weather data weather data corrections and moving towards having an automatic fill for any missing and quality controlled or quality issued weather information. So we're really hoping that by July-ish timeframe of next year, that we will be able to have almost basically like a once a day, we'll go back, we'll gap fill, and we'll QC the data, and we'll be able to have that updated and then do recalculations near once daily, so that we won't be seeing all these gaps in our information. If you get a 200-mile-an-hour wind speed, or if you forget to take the rubber band off the rain gauge, or if you turn your solar radiation sensor upside down for 2 weeks, it's going to catch all that and it's going to do the corrections for us. So we're working to try and get that so that we will have all of that going forward, hopefully by summertime of next year. That's kind of a loose goal at this point, but just kind of give you an idea of where we're moving forward with. So let's see here. Travis, anything else? I guess my other big thing would be snow flags. It's that time of year. Snow flags are starting to go on. Understand that our tolerance is right around a trace snow. So if you start getting a trace snow, and you will start seeing your snow flag on and off this time of year. I know that is one thing that we are also looking at, but I know that that's not as big of a deal this time of year for everyone. It's more of the springtime where, hey, we had a skiff of snow and it came off and we want to go burn, but yet the indices are showing like, zeros. So just make sure that you start tracking this and seeing if there's any issues, if there's snow flags either coming on or going off, and if something's wrong or completely wrong. And remember that it's not the individual location that it's looking at. It's looking at the broader 3-kilometer grid square around there. So you have to take that into account when you're considering that, is there snow in that entire area or not? Another piece, I guess we've had a couple of questions on, and it's been brought up, and it was brought up, I think, on the prescribed fire, or will be on the prescribed fire slides, is when you start looking at, say, 10-hour fuel moistures for doing prescribed fire, and if you want to go in here and you start taking your fuel moistures, you want to put these into behave. It is strongly recommended that this is not, just reminder that this is a Nelson model, and behave runs off of Fosberg, and they are not going to match. They are different. And if you model your fire behavior runs in behave, and then you come in to verify the day of or track the day of to see if you're within prescription, these two numbers will not, your Fosberg will not line up with what you ran in behave under Nelson, or sorry, what we have here in Nelson will not line up with what you modeled off of in behave, the Fosberg. Or if you were to go out and take the weather inputs and run them through behave and or did a field level calculation. So just a general reminder of that you can't, these are not interchangeable. Nelson tends to run a little bit higher for now, and that you need to be cautious when you're doing that information. Now, that doesn't mean you can't use these for seasonal tracking and understanding where you're at. If you're increasing or decreasing in fire danger, that's a great utilization of fire danger and these values, but just don't use it in the fire behavior calculations because they will underpredict where you're at. So, questions on that? Okay. Kelly, did you have any thoughts on that one? Or anything you wanted to add in?
No, I'll just say, Scott, you were probably preaching to the choir on that one. But we've dealt with that quite a bit in the southern region, and we're trying as hard as we can to educate folks to use Fosberg for fire behavior and Nelson for National Fire Danger Rating System.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I know Matt is trying to work on some calibration processes to try and get Nelson to line up better with Fosberg, but I don't think he's quite there yet. And I know he's been laid off, honestly, for a month now. So,
okay,
excellent. Well, if you find anything else out, please let me know. And like I said, I'll work on trying to get you those other points as well. So,
all right, thank you.
Yep. Jamie, you asked, will 3.5 include the 10-hour fuel stick outputs by chance? What are you looking for on that one, Jamie? You want to know the actual measured values from the stations? Just display measured values. No, we don't have that being in part of 3.5. I don't know if that was ever captured. Travis, do you remember hearing about trying to move that in as if the station has a 10-hour fuel stick displaying it?
It's been part of the conversation. There's never been anything put on the roadmap as far as how to do that. So the kind of similar thing would be soil moisture. Soil moisture is going to be a lot more tricky because we're going to have different sensors and depths and everything like that. But essentially, soil moisture and measured stick moisture are going to be analogous to our field sample data, only instead of sending somebody out to go gather it, we've got automated sensors that are gathering that information. So both those things are not part of the model itself, but definitely are things that can help to inform decisions.
Yeah, might be able to have Chuck dig into that one a little bit, huh?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good reminder. That's something we could put back out in front of us. That's a kind of enhancement to the system
based on the data that we do have available to us. We just have to figure out a way to work it into the user interface and display and whatnot.
Right. Yep. Okay. Okay. Let's see here. Oh, the other piece, obviously in 3.5 release, is trying to getting the Mesonet states networks added for the eastern half of the U.S. And so we're working really diligently on getting that completed. That is anticipated to be out for the release in December. There are also discussions about getting historical information or a period of record inputs for ASOS stations so that we can have seasonal trend charts for those as well, and the possibility of expanding the ASOS network across the rest of the country. So there are some discussions around looking at how to further that information going forward. And I'm hoping everybody's starting to pick up on the trend is that we're really focusing a lot still on the data integrity and the data piece going forward for the time being, because if we don't get all of these corrected now, when you start producing all of your analytics, you start seeing if some piece of data is wrong, all that does is, emphasize really the problem that the data had. And so we'd rather focus on this piece now, let the field get the displays that or the data that they need, and they can work on doing their analytics on their side while we then work at the long-term picture of where FEMS is going to go. But we need to get this data piece really hammered out first before we spend or get into any of the analytics itself and other displays of that. Because once we start going down that road, it's hard to go back to just, dealing with the data piece. So.
Yeah, and I mean, on the plus side to all of that, we've gone through the process, right? We brought in ASOS for the eastern half of the U.S. The process to do that for the western half, we can recreate. It's more of a matter of assigning priorities and time and things like that from the developer standpoint. So a lot of the stuff that y'all are asking for are things that are very close, and it's just literally we got to work the process.
All right, I've yammered long enough. What questions we have out there? Yeah, Dan.
Hey, Scott, I may have missed this at some point in the conversation, but what do we do about bad data? Do we file a report or something like that? Or because I found a station that's got like 180 and 200 mile an hour winds in a 1 month stretch, and it didn't necessarily skew fire danger stuff, but when I was trying to do an evaluation of stations which were possibly poor candidates for being in FDRS sites because of the sheltering factor, it skewed those results. So I was just curious, what's the best way to go about that? And more specifically, if it looks like it's a window of time, is that something we just ask somebody to make missing?
So we are not. Okay, so what the long-term or what the plan is, and this gets into exactly what we were talking about with the data. So what the process is for right now, the data is going to be in there. If you would like to remove that out of your data source, you can go ahead and delete those records. That's basically what Firefighting Plus would do anyways, would just say that record doesn't really exist. And so you can remove it. I know, obviously, like you said, as you move those really extraneous values, it doesn't impact your overall percentile values in the big picture. The long-term process for this is getting into where we have tolerance levels already set up. And so that individual points, as the observations come in, they will then check to see if one, the observation is missing or not. If it's missing, it will fill it from the grid. If it is not missing, and it doesn't meet a certain tolerance level, then it will pull the data in from the grid. So if you start seeing 200-mile-an-hour winds, it would replace that with, whatever the nearest grid point was showing for that hour. We need to, though, establish those tolerance levels and have that algorithm built up through WRCC with Tim Brown. And so that process is just starting, where we can get them, or we can start working with him to get that information. They're going to redo the period of record, which will be really just getting rid of those extraneous hours, and gap filling or QCing that data and actually changing the data. And then again, we would like to have it so that the original, or that as we move forward, all the data will be going through that process in an automated fashion. That way we don't have units needing to go in and do all these manual fills and all this information that we're used to in the past. So again, I'm just asking for patience on this one, that we are working on getting this process identified and solutioned out so that we can get it implemented into the data, or into FEMS itself, I should say.
All right, thanks, Scott.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Mr. Turner. How you doing?
So the FDRAs, or the averages, is there a plan to incorporate those in the stats graphs as well once you get the Power BI figured out or more developed?
We haven't gotten into, we don't have a standardized FDRA map coast to coast yet. So that's the problem. Well, that's one problem. And so where all that's going to integrate it into is yet to be determined. Yes, we are wanting to be able to get that information for the field, but again, we just don't have the specific roadmap of what that looks like just yet laid out. So it's going to be a while, I would say. If, again, field solution is going to be the answer for the time being.
Thank you.
Yep. And a lot of this development is honestly very contingent on budget going forward. So since we don't have one, everything's very kind of up in the air at this point. Other questions? Quiet group today. Okay, Travis, did you have anything else you wanted to add in? Topics I might have missed?
I think you covered everything. I know you mentioned the period of record. I don't know if we talked about any updates to that, but we are shooting to get up to 2024, right? So that is something that may be coming if we're able to get that piece in place as well.
Yeah, so that would be the 2023, 2024 data. Any of the gap fills would be, and then it would be quality checked as well. So
yeah, it'd be like that period of time for all stations. If we, for instance, had a station that didn't make the cut for the original period of record, but we've got a couple more years of data that we could throw in there. Those are ones that could come in, as well as the ASOS, Mesonets, any of those other stations that don't have them that fit the bill for what we're trying to do there.
Yep, thank you for bringing that one up. Yep. We're working on doing that as well, so. All right, going once, going twice.
Hey, Scott, this is Kelly again. I thought of a question.
Mhm.
Should the decision get made to use the 20-foot winds for the forecasted indices, what kind of time frame would you foresee of that? Are we talking weeks or months, or what would you think on that?
It would be a couple of months before we get that. So there was a question that was raised last week, and I did put the answer in the chat, was, are the forecast winds converted down to 20 foot? No, we are not converting the winds down from the 10 meter down to 20 foot. So that's where we're seeing where people are observing some of the discrepancies between, especially in BI, is that wind influence from the 20 foot, because they're, it's a difference of what, 10 feet. So that's where you're seeing some of the differences between that. The discussion is, does FEMS change, go through a converter and convert those 10 meter winds down to 20 foot and display it and calculate it that way? A couple of the questions that come around with that are then when you start looking at forecast wind outputs, and if you see those and then you compare those to a spot weather, or if you compare them to any other weather forecast if you compare those from any other weather service outputs, you will be having an issue because you'll be seeing some differences from the general forecast winds. So that would be one issue that we see. So we would have a non-standardized forecast wind for this. It would also not solve the problem of wind sheltering from our station. So you're probably still going to see a difference between those, because we're talking about just doing a standardized conversion from 20 or 10 meter down to 20 foot. So you're still probably going to still see some inaccuracies with the two. So we're having those discussions, what that would look like for the forecast winds, and if we want to make that change happen or not. So, but if it does, it would probably be a couple of months before we do see that.
Okay. Yeah, thanks for that explanation. And if we could do something to sort of close the gap a little bit between forecasted and actual, it would be helpful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and yeah, like I said, there's a lot that's going to factor into that as well. I mean, you also have to remember, because now WFDS is pulling from us as well, and how their forecast looks, and then it ties into as well. If you look at FLAM map, and if you pull our weather forecast from FLAM, if FLAM map's pulling our weather forecast in, which I believe they do, as opposed to like Wind Ninja. So there's a lot of questions that come down to, well, why is this forecast showing this, and why is this showing this, and how that's impacted. So.
Yeah, the crux of the matter there really is that analysis is done on observations and decisions are made on forecasts.
Mm-hmm.
Aligning those two things is something that takes effort on both sides of the observation forecast boundary there.
Yeah, and right off the bat, we're comparing, or we're looking at a gridded forecast and gridded information, and we're comparing that to a actual on the ground spot observation. And so those two are not going to line up as much as we ever try to. It's going to be very difficult to get those two to ever really mirror each other, because they're two different systems. As Travis, I think, pointed out originally, if we know that we're consistently high, at least we know we're consistently in one direction, and you can adjust for that. It's really hard when we're consistently we're accurate, but we're not consistent. You don't know if it's going to be high or low. So if you know that you're on average 10% high on the wins, you can make that a quick adjustment kind of on the operational side of your outputs and say, okay, I know I'm going to be a little bit high on this, and we can bump it down 10% or whatever. So
What we've seen in the southern region, Scott, is our staffing levels tend to run about one staffing level above reality, fairly consistently, except on a rainy day, they're spot on, but on a dry day, we're running about one staffing level too high.
Okay. Are you guys running BI?
Yeah, the ones that it's most pronounced are running BI, yes. And I've still got data coming in. I've not heard from everybody, but that's the majority of the feedback I've been getting.
And the forecast is running that just one staffing level too high. Okay.
Yes, correct.
Good information. I appreciate you sharing. Like I said, and yeah, if we can get some site specific information, it would help out in general with us. So
Yeah, I'm going to forward you some of that sometime probably next week.
okay. Any other questions, discussion topics? All right. And we will